Welcome back to another episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through a story about FEMA and a possible new approach to how it is going to be funded and arranged from the federal to the state level. And you may be saying, FEMA on the state level. Yeah, we'll get into it. And of course, we went today with our Daily Delight, a story meant to leave you feeling positive and ready to take on the day. But hey, that's enough rambling from me. Let's jump into our daily debate. So if FEMA was to issue catastrophe bonds, or state agencies of similar nature were to issue catastrophe bonds with a 7 or 8% yield, would you buy them? And let's say the maturity rate is let's say the maturity rate is 10 years. Would you buy them? Throw your comment down there in the comment section. Love to hear what you have to say. So with that, let's actually get into the article. This one comes from our friends at Raw Story. Headline reads, Trump plan to kill FEMA risks extreme state of turmoil, officials warn. Now, for those who don't know, Donald Trump doesn't like FEMA. He has been trying to reshape it. He's been trying to change how emergency response works, and he's created a task force that is meant to retool FEMA to work and possibly strip the federal funding down and find a way to make sure that states take on the burden. Now, is that a proper purview of the federal government? Can they tell states that they have to do this? Well, I mean, they can strip away the federal funding and then tell the states that you're on your own, but it's a little bit different than telling the states that they have to take on the risk of these natural disasters themselves. Is that necessarily a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. I'm not the arbiter of truth on this one, but I did run through some scenarios about how this should be possible, and I think that there's a way that it could be done. Now, you may think I'm crazy by proposing what I'm going to propose, but how I see it working out is a community needs and wants to be ready when disaster strikes, and a local community, a statewide population, is much better at understanding their own natural disasters. California much more often deals with earthquakes and fires than our friends in Arkansas, who deal with tornadoes and sometimes floods, which is very different than Florida, or different than Texas, or different than Montana, so on and so forth. These different locations bring on different risks, and these different natural disasters have different costs. So why not decentralize the procedure of paying for these risks? Why not move the burden onto these communities? That argument doesn't necessarily sit badly with me. The question is, how do we get there? So right now, FEMA's funding is about $69 billion. In order to fund that properly, you would probably have to wean the states off. You would have to tell them to either keep up their surpluses, increase their budgets, and find some funding, and slowly wean them off of FEMA money. Or, alternatively, you could do a bond, issuance initially. So my thought was probably a 10% yield bond, maturity of 7-8 years, and have this go out and basically be auctioned off. Or there's a committee in Congress that actually apportions them based on the relative risk and historical data based on the cost of natural disasters, and obviously weighed by population size. That's why you would do it in the House, because larger states obviously have larger populations, so they have more people that could be affected by this, therefore, or they're more densely populated areas, such as Catalina. California is a great example, and that's why you would have to use the chamber of the House that is directly affected by population to either have the auction process or at least the procurement process. And the states buy this off of the federal government. If they want to have these bonds and they want to have these extra protections. They basically buy them off of the U.S. Sorry, they're dispersed by the U.S. government, because to buy them would not actually be as effective. You could possibly have them bought at a discount. I think that that would be an interesting way to go about it. But if they're actually procured and given out, then that would probably be better. And they're issued on a federal level. And then from there, you have a system of catastrophe bonds rated from a yield of 5% to 9%. The state can do it however they want. They can take on whatever risk profile they want. Because only about 13 states now do catastrophe bonds. So imagine if we were to expand that program. And these would be issued to state members only. Now, you could possibly open it up to a broader market and say Arkansas has the ability to sell these bonds to the New York Stock Exchange. People can make ETFs out of them. I think that would be an interesting way around it, but I don't know. I feel like the healthier solution, or at least the least likely to be exploited, is that only residents of the state can buy it, because it's about funding the protections that they want as a community, and they get a little bit of a financial investment on the side. Maybe you could actually have a partnership with corporations that work within your state to make it part of their pension funds, maybe 5%. That feels like it could be a little bit crony. It feels like it could be taken advantage of, but I wouldn't outright dismiss it, because it could actually be beneficial, especially if those people who are who would benefit from those pensions live in that state. Why not have a investment that's going to make a little bit of money, especially as you get older, because bonds are a little bit safer. That also ensures that if a disaster hits, then your state is at least semi-prepared and has some of the the important services that it's going to need. Now, with that said, that's a novel-ish approach. There's never been a large-scale program proposed to that same degree, but the Trump team isn't quite there yet. Quote, Trump's FEMA Review Council, a 12-member board led by Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, has until mid-November to write a report detailing its recommendations for the president. But as Noem has noted several times during this group's 2 public appearances, Congress holds authority over FEMA and would need to sign off on any major changes. And that's the holdup. At the end of the day, FEMA cannot just be cut. It has to be reapportioned. We have to make sure that any huge structural changes go through Congress. And that will not necessarily end well for Donald Trump. I think to some degree he's right. Some people I've heard make the argument that we as a society have to take on the worst risks of our different locales, and we are here to protect and serve the people. That, of course, that argument resonates, and it makes sense to me. The argument of decentralizing these bonds, in my opinion, the bonds, but decentralizing the funding, if you want to go in the most general sense, also makes sense to me. There's a variety of these issues, and for Arkansas to incur the cost of for their tornadoes and the cost of their the hurricanes that would hit Florida, it could seem proportionally unfair. Populations paying into this and their tax dollars going to this. And even if you would say, well, it doesn't actually their tax dollars, they just appropriate more money and we go into debt, that devalues any U.S. currency, and that devalues what people have in their bank accounts. So yes, it is a secret tax, so to speak. So tell me what you think. Is this council going to be successful? Or are they going to be able to get changes done? I doubt it. And if you have a better idea, because I leave room for my idea to be absolute booty. If you have better ideas, throw them down there. Comment on mine. Tell me where I'm wrong. I went back and forth with basically 1 or 2 things. And I think that there's lots of holes. I'm sure there are things that I'm not seeing. But if you can fill those gaps, if you can point them out to me, I'd love to hear what you have to say. With that said, let's jump into our daily delight. This one comes from Dog Time. Headline reads, video, Golden Doodle puppy has an exhausting morning being the absolute cutest. And there's seems to be about 4 of them. They're running around, they're grabbing their nutrients. They're absolutely adorable. And if you want to have a bright day, I would suggest finding this article, which will be linked in the description below, the like and subscribe button, and going about reading it, watching it, and having a bit of a giggle, because it will leave you feeling so much better. So, with all that said, there's only, I didn't do the whole ending. So, if you want to find any of today's articles, they'll both be linked down there in the description below the like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find the podcast on Spotify, Podcast, Podvine, as well as the Twitter handle at your DailyFlip, where I post links to these episodes on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and 6 and 6, which is our international news story, 6 stories from around the world, 6 minutes or less. I post those links on Tuesday and Thursday. So, with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe. Don't die.